Hello, the Divine Code reading for April 19th, pages 333 and 334. We are in chapter The Laws of Saving Oneself or Another's Property or One's Property at the Expense of Another's Money and Taking the Law into One's Own Hands. Topic number 16. It was explained above, that's at the beginning of the chapter, that it is permissible to save one's own life at the cost of another's money or property, although one should do so with the intent to pay it back when possible, or with the conditional intent that he will pay back if the court determines that he is obligated to do so. So a person can, if their life isn't threatened, is threatened, or if someone else's life isn't threatened, or if a limb is threatened, a person's a major injury is being caused, it's possible to just take somebody else's property if necessary to save oneself. This is an emergency type situation where there's no time to discuss it with the property owner. The person needs it right away. Then it's permissible, but he has to pay it back. Either he has to intend to pay it back right away, himself, or he's going to leave it up to the court to determine. But if the court determines, he's going to accept that he needs to pay for it. Therefore, if someone is forcing or coercing a person to show him money or property of a third person, or even forcing him to steal another's money, then if the force is life-threatening, the action is permitted. And that would be life or limb or another person's life, or someone else's life or limb is being threatened. Show me, open up the door to the bank, or I'm going to shoot one of the customers. Well, the teller himself can't be shot. He's behind bulletproof glass. So the guy's threatening a customer. At that point, the person can open the door to save someone else's life, even though he's allowing the thief to take things. Or he can even hand the thief stuff. It doesn't have to be a teller. It could be just somebody else that happens to be in a situation where he's permitted to do this to save himself or another person. But if it is not life-threatening, so that, and that becomes, the question is what threshold would it be allowed? If it's not life-threatening, the coercion does not make it permitted to steal another's money or even show where the money is hidden, so the thief may steal it or force it out of the possession of the owner. Then again, if the person is, they're in pain, the thief is putting the person in pain, they might show they're not permitted to give in with the pain, but the pain can excuse later on. The person was under duress. The person was yelling at him. The thief is yelling at him, and therefore he's under duress. That can be used as a defense, even though it wasn't life-threatening. The person's not permitted to do it, but afterwards, it could be used as a defense for the person to say that he was under duress. But he's still not permitted at that point. It's just allowed. However, if money or an item is deposited with someone to safeguard, and the robber comes to force it from him, he may hand it over to the robber. In this case, he need not suffer harm or unreasonable duress in order to save the depositor's money, since it can be presumed that this was a condition upon which he agreed to safeguard the deposit. And Shokanora Korav, Laws of Monetary Damage, topic 10. So if in the case where someone, oh, okay, so if the person's being forced to aid the robber, um, the robber wants to rob the jewelry store, and he forces the person to ring the bell so he can get into so the jeweler will buzz him in. And if he doesn't do it, he says he's gonna shoot the person. Um, the person would be permitted to do it because he's under because his life is threatened. Now, if the person yells at him and badgers him, even though he doesn't threaten him, he's not going to shoot the person. He's just talking real mean to him. Then the person is not permitted to do that, to ring the bell so that the jeweler will buzz the door open. But if um, he's not permitted to, because it's somebody else's situation, it's somebody else's domain. Now, if the item is in his own domain, he has stewardship over the item. He's not required to go to the extreme of having his life threatened before it would be it's understandable that he would give up the item. It would be more on the issue of, if it was his own item, would he give it up at that point? Or maybe even not even to the extent that if it's his own item, he would give up it to his point. And this is part of the social contract involved in deposits, and it would vary between situations. Within the Jewish law, everything is spelled out nice and neat. Within non-Jewish law, it changes from different locations and different situations. It's not as clearly spelled out, and would have to go according to the contract, according to the accepted norm in that location, or according to the regulation or the laws of the government. If it's somebody, what the government and what society expects the steward, the steward, the guard to do to prevent the theft. It depends on what people expect them to do, and it's part of the contract. Topic number 17. Suppose one was asked by another to rent out an area to store produce, and he did not agree. And the owner of the produce then tricked him into storing it by giving a promise that he did not fulfill. So the person wants to rent a backyard. He says, "Hey, I've got this stuff. I wanna rent," and I assume it's not just produce; it's an item that the person would want to store. So let's say the guy's got an old car. He needs a place to put his old car. So he says, "Hey, I'd like to rent your backyard to put my old car in there." And the guy says, "No, I don't want to rent out my backyard for your old car." The guy says, "Oh, I promise to do your laundry for 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 as long as the car is there." The guy says, "Okay, all right, you can do your laundry. You can leave your car there, but you got to do my laundry." The person then he tricks him, because then he doesn't do the laundry. He's got the car in his backyard, in the person's backyard, but then he refuses to fulfill his promise to do the guy's laundry. When the produce owner has acted deceitfully, the owner of the storage space can act likewise in return. He may hire workers to throw out the produce into an ownerless area and then pay them from the produce. So the person who has the backyard, after he's been tricked, he can get some people, or he can do it himself. He can push the car into the alley, into the street, into an ownerless area. And he can even use, well, in the case of produce, that's a commodity, that's something that people expect to sell. So I don't know if it would apply directly to a car. It may or may not. Here it's talking about something that we expect people to sell. At least I assume that's what they refer to as produce. So he can use the produce owner's resources that are available to him. In this case, it'd be the produce, to pay the workers that are hauling his stuff out into the ownerless area. And then in an act of righteousness, it is then an act of righteousness to inform the produce owner about the action he has taken, so the produce owner can go and gather up the remaining produce that was tossed into the ownerless area. Shokanor Karav, Laws of Borrowing, Topic 8. There he writes that the owner of the warehouse must let the owner of the produce know that he will throw it out if he does not remove it, due to the obligation of returning a lost object. Since this reason does not apply to Gentiles, the author wrote that it is only a righteous trait and not an obligation to inform the owner of the produce about this. So in the case of the person taking the car, pushing it into the alley, there's a requirement in the Jewish law to return lost items. So at this point, it becomes a lost item. You know, the car is no longer where the owner thinks it is. It's now somewhere else. And so there's an obligation in the Jewish law to inform the owner to make sure the owner gets his lost item back. There is no obligation. It's more of an intellectual, nice thing to do to return, for a non-Jew to return lost items. It's something we should do. We're not required to, and therefore it's being counted as a righteous act. It's an act of righteousness to inform the owner. That would be a way of returning a lost item. Hey, your car's in the back alley. You know, come and get it. Topic number 18. If the owner of the produce did not act deceitfully, but rather moved his produce into the owner's storage without the knowledge of the storage owner, then if the storage was intended for rent for similar items, the storage owner has no right to throw the produce into the street or another ownerless area until he notifies the produce owner. So if the person has a backyard that he rents out to people wanting to store their cars, and someone takes their old car and they put it into the area that people rent, the guy rents it out, he can't just get rid of it. He has to he can charge the owner rent. He has to go through, it's now, even though it wasn't done correctly, there's now a contract because the space is for rent. So he can require the rent, but he can't just push the car back out into the street, or he has to follow whatever the rules are for getting rid of items that are not there properly. But it's a different rule if the area is an area that's considered for rent. But if it's in someone's backyard, it's not normally for rent. If the area is not intended for storage, it is permitted to first throw it out and then notify the owner afterward, the produce owner afterwards. But if he hires workers to do this, it is not permitted to pay them from the produce. So, as Shokanor Karav, Laws of Borrowing, Topic 9. So if the person does it stealthily, he places he brings his car into a parking area that is accepted for the person rents the space. It's a regular parking garage, and he kind of sneaks the car in there. He has to pay the rent but it's whatever the rules are for removing a car in that rental area. It's the same rules as would apply to a car that came in correctly. If it's not a parking area, but the person just brings their car in, the owner can remove the car. The owner of the area can remove the car or can remove the item, but he cannot use because there's no contract involved. There's a contract involved in the other case where the person tricks the person. There's a contract. In this case, there's no contract. So technically, the allowance of using the item would not apply in the second case. And I'm not, that depends on the social contract. It depends on, if it's a rental area, it might be written into the contract, the normal contract, that if the car, if the car is towed or if the produce is taken out of the storage area, um, it's part of the, there's a lien on the storage, and there's a lien on whatever's being stored. So it might be possible if that's normally the contract, but if it's not normally the contract, the person can't go out of his way. If there was no contract, you follow. If there's no contract, you follow. If it's stealth and there's no contract that was involved, then you go with the default contract, whatever's normal for that storage area. Because it's assumed that the person who brought his stuff in is accepting whatever's normal. The person who tricks a person, they've already gone outside of what's normal, and so it's okay to trick them back and use the stored item to pay the workers. But in the case where it's brought in stealthily, there's no signed contract, there's no agreement between the two parties, then it's whatever the normal thing is there, if it's a normal rental area. Thank you.